So today we're going to look at the transactional writing of the section of the IGCSE English Language exam. So that's section B, and today specifically we're going to look at the letter form. So as it says, one of the possible forms of writing that you'll be given in section B of the exam is the letter. You could be asked to write either a formal or an informal letter. The formality of the letter will be determined by two factors. First of all, who you're actually addressing the letter to. In this case, your audience. So whoever you are told you are supposed to write your letter to, that will dictate part of the formality. And then, of course, the topic of what you are writing about. Some topics are obviously going to be far more serious than others, and so therefore they will lend themselves to a certain level of formality or informality. For the purpose of this presentation, though, we're going to focus mainly on formal letters. So as it says, the audience and the topic will be given to you in the task. They will make it clear what you are writing about and who you are writing to. What you must remember, though, is this note here. It doesn't matter who the task really says that you are writing to. Your real audience is an examiner, so you've always got to remember that. Remember that you are being judged by an examiner, that you are trying to achieve the best mark possible. So let's have a look at the criteria then. So there's actually two assessment objectives for this particular piece, for the writing. There's AO4 and AO5. So AO4 is content and quality of communication, and AO5 is the SPAG. So we're looking predominantly at AO4 in today's presentation. So as it says, this is the marking criteria for AO4. And what it says is that you are to communicate effectively and imaginatively, adapting form, tone, and register of writing for specific purposes and audiences. Okay, so what does that mean? What does it mean for us? Okay, so realistically, what does the form mean? It means that your letter actually looks like a letter, and it uses the phrases associated with letter writing. Okay, the tone. Your letter reflects your ideas, your opinions, and the emotions on the topic. Your tone is the voice that you hear in your head when you're reading a piece. It's whether you can hear somebody being angry or upset or happy or surprised. Okay, that is the tone. It's that voice that you hear, and that's what your letter needs to reflect. It needs to be appropriate to whatever it is that you are writing about. Also, your register. Your register is the choice of vocabulary and the idea that you will choose the correct vocabulary, again, dictated by the topic and your audience. Okay. For example, if you are writing about climate change, you would be expected to use the register of science. You would be expected to use scientific language that you've been taught in your science lessons or your geography lessons about climate change. So that would be the correct register for your audience and for your topic. And finally, the purpose. The purpose is what you're actually attempting to do. And again, this will likely be in the task. And if it's not explicitly in the task, it'll definitely be implied. It might even be in some of the bullet points they give you as suggestions of things that you could talk about in your piece of writing. So it's things like whether you are trying to advise somebody or inform them, or whether you're making an argument or trying to be persuasive, or you're trying to explain something. So this is the criteria. This is what you are being judged on with regards to AO4. Okay, let's move on then. So let's talk about that voice that I mentioned earlier. As it says, the exam task is likely to ask you to write to somebody you wouldn't normally write to. So it might be a head teacher, it might be a politician, it might be a newspaper editor. Okay, it could be any number of different people. And also, it's likely to ask you to write about a subject you might only have a passing interest in. I mentioned climate change before. Climate change or green issues are always popular in exams. Any issue that they think might affect or be interesting to young people of your age. What the examiner doesn't want to do is they don't want to make it difficult for you by picking a topic that you're not going to know anything about. But whether you actually know a great deal about it or even care that much about it, it's kind of hit and miss. And as it says here, let's be honest, teenagers generally aren't given to writing letters to these kinds of people. So you're going to need to find a voice. Okay, the voice of the kind of person that would go to the effort to write a letter like this. Believe me when I say the letters or the pieces of writing in the exam that don't do well are the ones where the person writing the task clearly has zero interest in the topic that they're writing about, or they can't fake having an interest in it. Okay, so you think about it like this. In your letter, it could be your voice. If you're lucky and you get a topic that you are interested in, that you do care about, then by all means, use your voice. Or if you've got a passing interest in it, then fake it enough to show that you personally are interested. However, if you're not interested in it, if it's not something that you would usually pay attention to, then you might want to think about choosing the voice of a character. So when I'm thinking about these, I often think about who is really going to write a letter to a newspaper or a politician. Okay. And I find myself finding this voice inside me of this pompous man in his middle age, late 50s possibly. And he talks a little bit like this. And he writes to newspapers all the time because he's terribly, terribly angry about everything that's going on in the world. Or it might be that little old lady who is sick to death of the bins being left out, and she just cannot abide the way that the council are not doing anything about it. And I write to you to strongly object to things that you are not doing for me. And I hear those voices, and I know that sounds very silly, but a distinctive voice in your letter is a good thing. So as we say down at the bottom, whatever voice you actually find, it's got to be interested in the subject. It's got to care about the subject, whether because the voice agrees or not. It'll come through in the vocabulary you choose. Okay? So that's what you're trying to find when we talk about the voice and the tone of your letter. Okay, so let's talk about the conventions now. You've got to start with one of the following greetings. If it's a formal letter, you start with either dear sir or madam, or if you want to make up a sensible name, then you can make it dear Mr. whoever or dear Mrs. whoever. But you must start it like that, because that shows the examiner immediately that you are writing a letter and that you know how to write a letter. I've seen lots of examples of people just starting writing without the dear sir or madam or dear Mr. whoever. And if you do that, it can come across like you've started a speech, or you might even just be starting a newspaper article. because they are all quite similar. So you've got to start there, make it clear from the beginning, this is obviously a letter, and that starts with the greeting. Okay, after that, you want to start your opening paragraph. Now, your opening paragraph tends to be quite short. It'll likely only be 1 or 2 sentences, but it has 3 very important jobs. Number 1, it establishes the overall topic of the letter, which will be given in the task. It'll establish your point of view, whether you agree or disagree with the topic that you are writing about. It'll also establish the tone of your letter. So again, like that voice that I was talking about, how angry or offended or upset that you feel about the topic, that has got to come through. It also gives you the opportunity to begin using emotive language from the beginning. So here are some examples of opening paragraphs, and these can all be easily modified for your own purposes. So you could open with, I'm writing with regards to, whatever the reason is, insert that there. I am appalled, you would suggest. And I've emboldened appalled, because you can change that for any word, any negative emotive language. So it could be, I am disgusted, you would suggest, or I am offended, you would suggest. So these are easy phrases that you can just use and modify. Another example, I was incredibly upset by whatever it was that has happened. I feel that I must disagree strongly with your point that, and then whatever it is that you are actually responding to. And then finally, I'm writing to say how much I agree with. So we're going for the positive one here and insert the topic here. I would like to add my own ideas on the matter of. Note, as it says here, it's important to use emotive language that sets the tone for the rest of the letter. But also note that there is a balance. Don't go overboard or you'll not be effective. If it sounds like you are not taking it seriously, if it sounds like you're maybe going just a little bit too far because you think it's funny, the examiner will know and it will not sound right, and therefore it can't be effective. Okay, so let's move on now then. So let's talk about the body of the letter. So this is the main part of your argument. So as it says, the main body of your letter will address individual aspects of your overall argument. So this is where it's really important to have a plan. Your argument that you are going to make, your discussion that you are going to have, you need to have 4 or 5 individual points within that argument. And that helps you to then structure your letter and get better marks. Because for each argumentative point that you make, each of those points is going to get its own paragraph. As it has got its own paragraph, you'll then deal with it clearly and in detail on its own. Remember, one topic per paragraph. That's how paragraphs work. And also within those paragraphs, you're going to use a variety of the persuasive techniques that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in this presentation. So for 45 minutes, which is what the examiner recommends that you spend, time that you spend on this part of the exam, they are going to expect for you to write 4 to 5 well-developed paragraphs in this section of your letter. And when I say well-developed, I do mean well-developed. Each of these paragraphs should be 5, 6, 7 lines long at a minimum if you are going to explain your ideas in plenty of detail. If you find that you are writing paragraphs that are 3, maybe 4 lines long, they are not long enough. You have not explained your argument in detail. You will not have persuaded your examiner that that point that you've just made is worthwhile. So as it says, you've got to have at least 4 to 5 different points to make about your point of view. It's really important that you plan so that you know exactly what you're going to write in each of these paragraphs. Moving on now. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about the actual structure of the letter, but also the language that you're going to use. This covers over into the SPAG marks now. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit more about AO5. So we're going to talk about discourse markers, and these are the words and phrases that we use to signal where we are in our argument. Realistically, once you've got your opening paragraph out of the way, every single paragraph should start with a discourse marker. And they will show us whether your argument is developing, whether you are simply adding to a point that you've already made, whether you're moving on to a new point within your argument, or whether you're looking at an alternative point of view. And on the next slide is a breakdown of most of the frequently used discourse markers, and most of you will have seen our literacy triangles before, but there it is for you, and you can stop this presentation whenever you want and look at those, and there you go. Those are your connectives. Those are your discourse markers. Now, in the body of your letter, as it says, most letters are going to have some element of argument or persuasion to them. So it's important to use the techniques that will help you achieve that purpose. And many of you will know this acronym, DeForest, and it's there to help you remember the different writing techniques that you could use to strengthen your argument. And again, this is the kind of thing that the examiner will expect to see. These are the accepted ways of writing persuasively or argumentatively. And so here's DeForest broken down. So we start with D, which is direct address. And so this is talking directly to your audience. For example, isn't it time you took this seriously? It's there to engage your audience, to make it sound like the text that you have written is actually aimed just at them. It brings them into what you are saying and makes them pay attention. Okay, that's why we use it. Now, A can be either for alliteration or anecdotal evidence, and I'm not going to explain what alliteration is right now. Anecdotal evidence. An anecdote is a real life story, and in this case, you would make up a real life story that highlights your point. It makes it personal. We're going to talk about facts and statistics in a little bit, but if you talk only about facts and statistics, and it loses some of the personality, it loses the human touch. So we use anecdotes with real people in them to show how whatever it is that you are talking about impacts on real life. And it helps your audience to form a connection with what you're talking about. But we can't ignore F, which is facts. Facts are information that is true and proven to be true. And we use these as the foundation for our arguments. Okay? Because they cannot be argued with, they make the perfect foundations. Also, then we have O, which is opinions. So your opinions are those of experts. And again, these are used to give a real voice to the argument. Okay? Now, you can say, I think, or I believe, or in my opinion. You can do that. If you want to give more weight to it, then you can also use expert opinion. So you could have Professor whoever of Oxford University has said and then make up a quote of what that professor might have said that supports your argument. Then we have rhetorical questions. Now, let's make it clear from the start. The point of a rhetorical question is it closes down any answers. It makes the answer so obvious that it forces the audience to think the way you want them to think. And in my opinion, the best place to use them is at the end of a paragraph. Please don't use them at the end of every paragraph, but use them at the end of a paragraph because it wraps up neatly the point that you've just made. E is emotive language, and you've seen this already. Used right at the beginning, it's there to show your emotions on a subject. And you can choose all sorts of different adjectives. You know, something could be magnificent, it could be tragic, it could be awesome, it could be terrifying. These are all words, adjectives that we could use to describe things, but they are emotive. S is for statistics, so just like fact, we can use them to support points with evidence. You can make them up, but please keep them realistic. Examiners for many years have said that statistics only work if they feel realistic. If they start getting statistics where 100% of people have all agreed on something, or 99% of people have all agreed on something, then it just sounds ridiculous. So keep them realistic. And finally, the triplet. Now, this is the list of 3 things. And the way that a triplet really works is that it should get more powerful the further into the triplet it gets. Okay, with the final point, the final word in the triplet being the most powerful, the most important point you want to make. And I've stolen from Shakespeare here. And as Tybalt says, peace, I hate the word as I hate hell, all Montagues and thee. And so in that case, he's saying that he hates Montagues more than he hates hell, but more than all of that, he hates thee, who is Benvolio at that point. Okay, so that is De Forest, and the examiner would be expecting to see a variety of these being used throughout. Okay, you don't have to tick them all off, but you do have to use a fair few of them through your 5 paragraphs. Now let's talk about the final paragraph. Okay, this brings us back to the actual conventions of the letter, the form of the letter, and what it should look like and sound like. So as it says, like the opening paragraph, this will be short. Again, it's likely only to be 1 or 2 sentences. But again, it has a very clear purpose. It should sum up your argument, and you should finish by restating your point of view. And my suggestion, my advice, is that you should be confident at the end of your letter that you have actually succeeded. So, for example, you might have, I am sure that on reflection, you will agree that, and then whatever it is was the point that you were trying to make. Or, I have no doubt, it is clear the course of action should be, and again, that would be restating something, some piece of advice that you have mentioned earlier that is the main drive of your letter. Or you could just end with, I would hope that. You will agree that this needs to be done. Okay? So that is your final paragraph. And again, they expect to see it. You don't go from your final argumentative paragraph straight to signing off. You have this 1 or 2 sentence final paragraph to bring it all together. And then you finish with the sign off. Now, how you sign off all depends on the greeting that you chose right at the start, because there are rules. And no, I don't know why the rules are the rules that they are. Everybody always asks me, and I do not know. But it works like this. If you started with dear sir or madam, then the sign off is yours faithfully. If you started with dear Mr. something or Mrs. something, because you know the actual name of the person, it means that you finish with yours sincerely. And then you finish with your formal name. Now, it could just be your name, as they are here, Steve Rogers or Bruce Banner. Okay. Or it could be your grown-up name. So in my case, it would be yours faithfully, Mr. Andrew Kirk or Mr. A. Kirk. Or it'd be yours sincerely, Mr. A. Kirk or Mr. Andrew Kirk. But again, these conventions need to be there. They need to be done respectfully and sensibly.